Hi, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Packers Unscripted from Packers.com. I am Mike Spofford, joined, as always, by my trusted colleague, Weston Hodquist, coming to you here from our studios at Lambeau Field. And Wes, I apologize. I'm going to dominate the early part of this conversation because I have a lot to explain to our viewers and listeners. There have been some technical difficulties going on, to put it mildly. Our last episode, which we taped last Thursday, did not get posted for a couple of days because of these technical issues. It is available on Packers.com, but video only. There are still issues with regard to audio uploads and the whole podcast thing. These are out of our control. They have to do with the NFL's platform, and these issues, to my knowledge, they're working on things to get them resolved, but we don't know when they will be resolved. So our last episode is available. It was just posted late. This one will be posted the same way, video on Packers.com, not in podcast form. And because of all of these technical issues and all of the logistics with the upcoming trip to Brazil, this will be our only episode for this week. We are not going to try to do an episode from Brazil. There's just too much other stuff going on. So I hope did I explain all that?
Yeah.
Did I cover all the bases?
And until next time, he's Mike, I'm Wes.
Yeah.
We'll see you next time.
But we do have a show to get to, and because this is our only show this week, this show will serve as the preview for Friday night's Week 1 season opener in Brazil. Our last episode, Wes, we talked about all of the roster machinations, the trade, the waiver claim, backup quarterback, kicker, how it all shook down. But now, Week 1 is here, so my question for you is, are you ready to go to Brazil?
I'm so ready. I'm so ready for this entire thing to get going. I remember talking to you when I came back. I mean, we had that really busy first day of training camp, right, where we had practice in the morning. I went and covered the shareholders meeting in the afternoon, and that seems like a decade ago. and here we are still kind of leading up to this first meaningful, tangible football game. And the fact that, we're going to South America for the first time, the NFL, this is their debut in Brazil, and trying to expand the global footprint of this game, what it means on that level, just hearing some of the guys talk about that this week. But then also from the X's and O's perspective, which Matt LaFleur has been harping on big time. This is not a vacation. This is not a trip. This is something where the Green Bay Packers have to go into this stadium against this opponent and come out with a victory, because suddenly, Michael, for as much as we prepared and we team bonded and we put in the hours, now it's time to play football again, and the Green Bay Packers have a very difficult opponent facing them in Brazil.
Yeah, 100%. And I don't know about you, but I get the sense both last week as the roster stuff sorted out, and then this week as the team has gotten into the practice routine for the game in Brazil and everything, I get the sense that these guys in this Packer locker room, whether this game is in Brazil or at Lambeau Field or in the city of brotherly love or in Timbuktu, these guys are eager to get out there and play a real football game again. I mean, I think it's partly the way last season finished, both in terms of the late season run and the disappointment of how things ended up. But it's also the youth of this team, all of these young guys that are taking a step forward, but also all the changes that have gone on with this team. You have a brand new running back who's going to be the new bell cow running back in this offense. You have a new defensive coordinator and a new approach on defense. Suddenly there's also a new kicker in the mix. I mean, for a team like the Packers that made the playoffs and made a run and it is considered a contender in 2024, there's a lot of change with regard to this team. And I think these guys are eager to get out there and show it. They can't wait.
Yeah, it was funny too, because even though there has been that amount of change, as we saw from the 33rd team's report, this is still the youngest team in the National Football League.
By quite a significant margin, frankly.
After all of that, Green Bay Packers are still the youngest team in the league. But, I was sitting there and I was talking with Bo Melton for a story I worked on that actually posted on Wednesday. And him talking about the tight-knit nature of that locker room, certainly with the receiving core, That's one of the things that has made that room go. But just the amount of love that those players have for one another. And I think some of that is steeped in, the team and the team bonding, and obviously winning at the end of last season helps. But it's the fact that they're basically all in the same social circle. I mean, all these receivers are pretty much the same age. Even the guys that are more veteran, like Josh Jacobs, is 26 years old. I mean,
right.
The Green Bay Packers have such a young nucleus there that has grown together, that has seen themselves go through the ups and the downs and the ebbs and the flows. And because of the way the Packers structured their preseason, the offense only playing 3 snaps, the starting defense only playing 8 snaps, so many of these guys, whether it's the new incoming free agents like Jacobs, like Xavier McKinney, or it's just the undrafted players that made the roster, so many guys are just kind of champing at the bit to get out there and play football again and challenge themselves. Because even though it was a sour aftertaste to how things ended for the guys that came back from Santa Clara, the optimism that has followed them, seeing how Jordan developed in the second half, seeing how this offense came together, and seeing how this defense and this self-belief that they've been fostering here under Jeff Hafley, I think it gives them the confidence they want and the early momentum they want to try to start this thing off fast.
Yeah, I think there's some really interesting things about this particular matchup. I started to suggest it a little bit on our last show, but when you look at the fact that, these are 2 teams that went to the playoffs last year, they finished the season kind of, going in very different directions. But that being said, the Green Bay Packers have a new defensive coordinator. The Philadelphia Eagles have a new defensive coordinator. They also have a new offensive coordinator as well. Both teams have a new number 1 running back with Saquon Barkley, whom Packers are plenty familiar with, having faced the Giants each of the last 2 years away from Lambeau Field and coming up short in both of those games, and Barkley playing a huge role in both of those losses to the Giants. The Eagles now have Barkley. The Packers have Josh Jacobs. And when, on the subject of change, I think one of the things that's interesting about the Eagles, and we're not there every day and processing all of it and covering all of it, but when you think of the mainstays over the years of the Philadelphia Eagles, 2 of them in center Jason Kelce and defensive tackle Fletcher Cox, neither one of those guys is there anymore. That's a big adjustment for that team in the trenches on both sides of the ball, wouldn't you say?
I would say it's a huge difference maker. I mean, I made that kind of quip last week about the tush push, but I mean, there's so much that Kelce did that goes beyond that.
Yeah.
As Kenny Clark was saying this past week, he was really the general up front. As talented as Lane Johnson is and as talented as Jordan Mailata is, it was Jason Kelce as far as the captain up there, the communicator, the guy that when you think about those really dominating Philadelphia Eagles offensive lines, he was the center of that. Now, Cam Jurgens is the one that I think is sliding over, handling those responsibilities. I'm very interested to see this next chapter from Mekhi Becton. He transitions going from the Jets. Now he goes over to Philadelphia.
Right.
He's going to be making a shift inside to guard after things didn't go great for him at tackle. But overall, I mean, Landon Dickerson, I mean, the way that they have structured this thing, they have built so many resources into that offensive line. Interested to see where that goes. Defensive line-wise, I think they're set up pretty well. Fletcher Cox was a stalwart, one of the best to do it, especially at his size and his position. But, I mean, you look at last year, I mean, Jalen Carter, this guy, we knew what he was athletically coming into the league.
They drafted Jalen Carter because they knew that Fletcher Cox couldn't play forever, right? I mean, this is the guy they're trying to make that transition from that anchor in the middle of the defensive line. They're trying to make that as smooth as possible.
And with him coming in and getting 6 sacks right off the bat last season, I think he showed his natural athleticism. Now he's going to get more comfortable. The expectations are sky high for him. Jordan Davis is a guy that I'm also very high on. I think he's a good complement to Carter. The one change that's going to be very interesting, though, for me watching this Vic Fangio defense and knowing and having such experience with what Fangio has done in this league for so long is it is kind of an inside out. They are more geared towards what they have in the middle of that defense as opposed to the edges, which historically, when you think of the Blitzburg schemes and some of the things that he did in Chicago and obviously San Francisco.
Well, one of their top pass rushers, Hassan Reddick, he's now with the Jets and holding out for a new contract and all that. The Eagles sort of got rid of that problem from a financial standpoint, but the guy was also pretty darn productive as a pass rusher for them, and they have to find a way to replace that with Fangio's scheme.
Yeah, and we'll see who all emerges on the edges. But in terms of this early part of the season, I think it's the interior defensive line is where they're looking to hold up, despite the fact that Fletcher Cox is no longer there.
Yeah. I'll take care of a little bit of sponsor business here, Wes. Sirius XM NFL Radio delivers hard-hitting analysis and up-to-the-minute NFL news that true football fanatics need 24/7, 365. And at Cousin Subs, we have something for everyone, like our Wisconsin cheese curds, mac and cheese, golden fries, and creamy shakes, all paired with your favorite sub or sub in a bowl. Cousin Subs, 50-plus years of better. All right, for those wondering about some of the logistics with regard to this trip, the Packers are traveling to Brazil on Wednesday. It's essentially an all-day flight. I've heard anything from like 10 to 12 hours that the plane will be in the air. Then there will be a practice of some sort on Thursday, and there will be some interviews, media availability, a lot of that being for the Brazilian media who are covering the first NFL game in that country. And then there will be sort of the long wait on Friday all the way up until the game is played in prime time. Hopefully we're going to have a way to watch the Chiefs and the Ravens on Thursday night, like at our hotel or something. I'm assuming maybe we can get together and do that to pass a little bit of time. But that's sort of the plan for the trip itself. So Packers leaving for Brazil very soon. I'm just going to throw this out there to you, Wes. When you look at this game, and week ones, as we've talked about in the past, I actually wrote a story earlier this week about how week ones can be so unpredictable. Teams holding stuff back, not showing things in the preseason. They got all these tweaks and whatever in the playbook, and then we've already talked about all the changes with the coordinators and the running backs and everything else. But what is at the top of your list as a key to victory for the Green Bay Packers in this matchup?
Winning in the trenches. And I will talk specifically on the offensive line aspect of this. The Packers said they have their plan for how they're going to handle right guard. They know what they're going to do on Friday night. We don't know yet if it's Sean Ryan, if it's going to be the rookie first-round pick Jordan Morgan, or a combination of both, like it was at the end of last season with John Runyon and Sean Ryan managing that position. We'll have to wait and see. But if the Packers can hold that Fangio front at bay, we've seen time and time again what Jordan Love can do, being able to manipulate the pocket, being able to look downfield towards his weapons. Green Bay Packers, Mike, you knock on wood for it, but Matt LaFleur discussed it this earlier this week. This is the healthiest they've been going into a season under Matt LaFleur. Because if you remember last year, even though they got through the preseason okay, then you had Christian Watson develop the hamstring injury in a practice in that little bye week or whatever you want to call it before the opener.
Right.
They ended up starting Malik Heath. Malik Heath ended up becoming the first undrafted rookie to start at receiver for the Packers in a week one opener since 1970, since the merger. This year you have everybody available. Malik Heath, depending on how you look at it, is probably 5 or 6 on the depth chart.
Right.
This is an opportunity, I feel like, for the Green Bay Packers to protect the quarterback and let Jordan Love go to work. You want to respect everything that Philadelphia has to offer. They were a very good football team, a Super Bowl contender, a Super Bowl favorite, basically through December 1st of last year.
Right.
But things went the opposite direction. If you can control the physicality of this game, if you can come out fast, if you can make them kind of second-guess themselves thinking, okay, wait, is this going to be any different than the end of last season? That's the momentum you have to seize. Because we've seen it time and time again with Fangio, whether it was in Denver, whether it was in San Francisco, whether it was in Chicago, and the list goes on and on. If you allow that front to start penetrating, that's where everything else gets set up defensively.
Yeah, I'm with you there, because when I think about facing Vic Fangio defenses, I always think about those moments where Fangio dials something up in a certain situation to get that negative play, the tackle for loss, the sack, the play that just disrupts the drive, right? And I think if the Packers can get something going with Josh Jacobs to where their play action game can keep that Fangio defense honest, I think having watched, and this is really whether it's been Aaron Rodgers or Jordan Love at the controls of a Matt LaFleur offense, Matt LaFleur's offense is at its best and in its best rhythm and at its most dangerous when the play action game is working. And you can't get the play action game working until you get something going on the ground. And that's where you talk about controlling things in the trenches so that you move the line of scrimmage a little bit, you get them to have to respect Josh Jacobs, and then they got to play you honestly, run or pass, and that play action, I think, becomes huge. With the maturation of the weapons around Jordan Love at receiver and tight end, I'm really excited to see what this offense can do when that play action game gets rolling.
This game will be won and lost based on explosive plays. And whether that's the 18-plus passes, 18-plus yard passes, or 12-plus yard runs, that's the domino effect that you're looking for. Because conversely, Philadelphia with A.J. Brown, with Smith, with all these different guys that they can throw at you. Obviously, the Packers, as you talked about, have seen Saquon Barkley. We saw how Saquon Barkley's explosive plays affected last year's game against the New York Giants.
Absolutely.
Those are going to be the huge aspect of this that the Packers are going to need to buoy themselves with to try to find that victory. And all that being said, when you bring it back to Josh Jacobs, I remember sitting at the table with Matt LaFleur in Orlando at the NFL owners meetings, and he was talking about, they aren't sure if he's going to be a 300-touch guy here like he was in Vegas. That's typically not the way the Packers have gone about it. But he can do it.
Yeah.
And especially in this early part of the season where you're trying to figure out, okay, exactly what you have now that A.J. Dillon's not there as a complement. You have Marshawn Lloyd coming back. You practice this week on the hamstring. We'll see whether or not he's in the cards for Friday night. Emmanuel Wilson is healthy again. Could he be an RB2? Those are things that we're going to learn throughout the course of the season, throughout the course of September. But from day one, you know what you have in Josh Jacobs, and being able to keep him healthy, keep him fresh, and have him so motivated to show that he's still one of the top running backs in this league. I just look at him as the perfect complement right now to what Jordan Love is doing in that quarterback spot, and offensively how the Packers want to spread this thing out.
Yeah, and defensively for me, I know that Jeff Hafley has been, it's been about the play style and wanting to attack the football, take the ball away and all that. And the Packers, they need to improve their takeaways. They need to get more turnovers on defense. They were, toward the bottom of the league in that category last year, and that is something that can definitely change, and they are going to try to change that equation. But when I look at this matchup in particular, and when I look at guys like Saquon Barkley and Jalen Hurts, the quarterback for the Philadelphia Eagles, and the fact that this is week one, and you've had a whole bunch of defensive starters who, they only played a handful of snaps in the preseason. Everything else has been practice, joint practices, etc. To me, this game comes down to tackling. Because when we've seen Saquon Barkley do his damage against the Packers, it's because he's breaking tackles. And when you look back at that game 2 years ago in Philadelphia, when in the first half in particular, when Jalen Hurts was kind of running all over Green Bay and the Eagles were building that big lead, the Packers usually had somebody in position to make the play, but they missed the tackle. And now those guys, Saquon Barkley and Jalen Hurts, are paid to break tackles. That's part of that's part of the deal, right? So you're not going to make every single tackle, but man, if you can make some of these one-on-one stops against these guys in the open field and not let them slip through to then where they get in, more into the open space, I think that's what's going to cut back on the explosives and try to, keep this thing contained because, and we haven't even really talked too much about the Eagles receivers yet, but Barkley and Hurts are dangerous playmakers. Well, and they can turn a game around in a hurry.
They knew they needed a guy like Barkley. I think last year proved it. You saw with Jalen Hurts, he was my quarterback in fantasy. It was not a great season for Hurts, and takeaways and turnovers became a huge issue for them, and not being able to overcome those defensively. And being able to get a guy like Barkley back in there, being able to have somebody that's going to complement and really be able to be a bell cow when they need him to be, but also his running style and how it could actually help maybe make Hurts a little bit more elusive. That's the combination they wanted to get back to with this move. And even more than that, I think for the Packers' standpoint, it comes back to the takeaway aspect of it as well. If you're able to get an interception, if you're able to get a punch out like what happened last year with Barkley, that almost saved the Packers in that game too. I mean, they had a 3-and-out afterwards, but otherwise it looked like that could have been a turning point when they got that football, even though it was kind of a wonky play. Now you flash forward into this season, and the way that everything is structured with this matchup, there's going to be unknowns. There's going to be things they're going to throw at you. You're going to have to overcome those moments of adversity. But seizing that momentum back and finding outlets to, really control the tempo of this football game is going to be paramount. Because again, as I alluded to earlier, with A.J. Brown, who's going to end up going down as probably one of the best trades in the modern era for Philadelphia being able to acquire him a few years ago, Devontae Smith and where his arrow is pointing right now, they have guys, much like with Christian Watson, that can just completely take the top off the defense in addition to dicing you up underneath if you let them.
Sure.
And if Jalen Hurts gets in that rhythm, in addition to all the ways that they can gut you out of the backfield, that is the path to victory for Philadelphia. So from Green Bay's standpoint, getting after them early and often is going to be paramount.
Yeah, and we'll see where things land on special teams in this game. Of course, now we've been talking about this new kickoff thing. It's going to be for real now. We don't know. I mean, how much were teams just keeping under wraps in the preseason, not really showing what they were going to do, et cetera. The Packers have a brand new kicker, an undrafted rookie in Braden Narvison. And we'll have to see how that goes. Anything else that stands out to you in any phase of the game as something that's a key to victory here for Green Bay? Because I'll just say this: in 2022, Packers had a rough season, but and other than the final game against Detroit when there was the shot to get into the playoffs and the Packers failed and didn't get in. To me, there was no more depressing loss of the entire 2022 season than the loss in London against the Giants. And not just because it started a losing streak, but everything that goes into it, all the long travel, the logistics, figuring everything out, and just how exhausting the whole process is to play these international games. To come away with a loss was it was deflating. It was depressing. Getting a win in this game, and I know the Eagles are after the same thing, clearly, but getting a win in this game could be just enormous to set the table for 2024 for the Packers.
And if you get off to a fast start, sustaining that's what made the gut loss against the Giants so gut-wrenching, is the fact that through the first half, it looked like that was just going to be something that, they could control this thing and, walk away with a win against a Giants team that not a lot of people were expecting out of, much from at that time.
Right.
And then, lo and behold, I mean, obviously, give credit to the Giants; they were much better that season than we all thought.
They ended up going to the playoffs and winning a playoff game.
Resurgent year for Saquon Barkley that season that got him back on track with his career, but the Packers let that one out of their grasp.
Yep.
This is going to be the difference now. And to be honest with you, I'm very curious to see what that environment is like and how the Packers handle it. I mean, again, it could be more like that soccer type style where you're just going to have people cheering and ranting and raving just for 60 minutes, regardless of who has the ball. I could see people being that energetic and that exuberant about this, managing those elements. The Packers have done everything they can do to prepare for this. Last Thursday, going out at Lambeau Field, predicting and kind of laying out their entire day like a game day, and then having, that practice out here. All those things are part of the equation in this. It's a huge game. It's an international showcase, but it is just a game, and it's a week one opener. And regardless, you win, lose, or draw, you have to come back here at Lambeau Field next week and face the Indianapolis Colts. The gauntlet has begun. There's no better way to start that, though, than a victory in what is supposed to be a road matchup in probably a much more favorable crowd, I would say, Mike, than what they would have seen at the Link.
I think it is. I think it is going to be a much more favorable crowd for the Packers than what they would get at the Link. It's interesting because over the years in Philadelphia, things have gone either way for the Packers. Right, there have been some really, really tough and in fact some kind of blowout losses, and there have been some really, really uplifting victories as well. I do think, much like London a couple of years ago, I do think the crowd is going to be in Green Bay's favor in this, from what we know about the Packers fans in Brazil, the Packers fans in South America. So hopefully the Packers can take advantage of that, because it was something they did not take advantage of 2 years ago at Tottenham Hotspur.
You take advantage of it, you have 9 home games the rest of the season.
That's right.
That's the other aspect of this. 9 home games and 7 away the rest of the way. Yeah. So huge opportunity for Green Bay, and I think that's the biggest point that Matt LaFleur's been drilling home. And again, listen to guys talk about in the locker room this week. Everybody understands the business aspect of this thing, and while it is a long freaking flight, and you better have something to either keep your mind occupied or sleep, this is also something where The Green Bay Packers just have to go into that stadium like it's any other NFL venue.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, with that, we'll call it a wrap on this edition of Packers Unscripted. Be sure to follow all of our coverage of the team and all of our coverage of Friday night's season opener from Sao Paulo in Brazil against the Philadelphia Eagles. We will have everything for you on Packers.com. For Wes, I am Mike. Thank you for tuning in, everybody. We will see you next time.